Service Committee meeting to order on May 21st, 9 o'clock. We'll have roll call, please.
Ms. Weber? Present. Ms. Parker? Present. Mr. Legess? Present. Ms. Polk? Mr. Snipes? Ms. Peters? Present. Ms. Dunbar? Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Zenz? Present. Mr. Carrico? Present. Mr. Eckhoff? Mr. Featherling? Present. Mr. Swanson? Present. Ms. DiColo? Mr. Wheeler? Present. We have a quorum.
Don't have any. I do not have anybody who has given me a public comment sheet, so I assume there isn't any public comment. Okay. Looking at the minutes, you have received them speedily from Kelly from the April 16th meeting. Is there any comment or a motion to approve? Ms. Parker and Mr. Featherling seconds it. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say aye. A motion carries. Okay. Let's go first to the county clerk, Dan Hendrickson's report.
Good morning, everybody.
Okay, do you want me, were you looking at me so I could say, well, somebody please move to accept your report?
That works for me.
Okay, Ms. Peters, first is it, motions, and Mr. Swanson seconds. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say aye. Motion carried. Thank you for your nudge.
Okay. Good morning, Maya.
No, let's put you on.
Should I speak louder then?
No.
Okay. Good morning again. Just wanted to touch base on a couple things. Our economic interest, statement of economic interests. Wanted to recognize one of my staff. Felicia, you want to step up to one of the microphones? But Felicia's been in our office for 10 years, and it probably seems like she's been doing economic interest for at least 30. But
Gotcha.
Hello.
but
You can hear me?
It's 10 years next week, right?
Yes.
Okay. Felicia does a tremendous job with the statements of economic interest. We send out, did we do 1,100 this year?
Yeah, 1,080.
1,080. So she's responsible for making sure that she contacts all the agencies to get the information to them, to send us the list of the people who are required to file their economic interest, and then subsequently sending out those notices to, most of you have gotten a notice from Felicia about filing your economic interest. So basically bird dogging that and getting that all through, and doing that while maintaining the rest of her work. Felicia does do our county board minutes, and during that economic interest time, we have elections going on too. So I didn't know if any of you had any questions about the statement of economic process, but if you did, I wanted to have Felicia here if she could answer any of your questions, and I wanted to recognize her for the hard work that she does. So
Thank you, Dan.
so, anybody have any questions for her? Otherwise, I'm going to turn her loose.
All
Well,
right.
I'd like to comment that it is so easy to do online.
Great.
And you can even print it out that you are verifying it, but then other agencies can see it online
Yes.
too. So if you have two different interests, both of them can see it. So thank you for that.
All right.
And one of the nice things about that is that when we implemented that online portion of the economic interest statement, and it saved us postage. We do 2/3 of our economic interests online.
Yes.
So if, 2/3 of 1,000, that's 700 letters that we're not sending out with 700 pieces of postage, and so saves the county a few $100s a year. So
And everybody filed. There was no penalties, so everybody filed on time.
That was my
So-
question. Isn't that a record or something?
well, that
This
was
year-
a lot of phone calls and
Lots of
and-
communication with the clerks and the individuals themselves that I try to contact, so that way they don't have to pay that $15 late fee. So
Nice. Thank you for your
Yeah.
effort. For sure.
So thank you, Felicia.
okay,
Oh,
thank you.
Excuse me.
don't leave yet, Felicia.
9. Okay.
Thank you. What are the penalties if you don't fill out an economic interest form?
If you don't fill one out, the deadline to fill one out, if we've received your name on the list by May 1st, it's $15. After May 15th, it's $100 a day. And by May 30th, we turn it over to the state's attorney for them to prosecute. The person could lose their position.
And that happened a couple of years ago.
It did happen a couple of years ago.
This board.
Yes. So,
With Felicia, it doesn't seem like it could happen. She would just come to your house.
well, we haven't gotten that far yet where we're sending people out, but you know, we do expend every effort we can because we don't want to necessarily take people's money, but if they just don't want to fill it out, then sometimes we have to.
Mr. Featherly.
I'd like to thank her for being so helpful. A few years ago, I was having computer issue problems getting it to go through.
You have to talk into the mic, I'm sorry.
Getting it to go through, and when I contacted her, she actually was on and carried me through the whole process while I was on the phone with her.
Felicia does do a phenomenal job with the
I'd like to
economic
thank her for
interest.
that. I could do it now by myself,
All right.
but I forgot to.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Dan was chasing me around.
Oh, he was.
Just
Thank you for
Okay.
saying that.
Next item on our agenda is a property tax extension. Linda Settle in the back, if you want to step over to the microphone, Linda. She's my tax extension coordinator. Linda has been here 8 years, been doing extensions for 5 or 6?
5, I think.
5, okay. Linda does a great job too. You know, in the midst of doing all the tax extension work, we've got elections going on too, so she does a great job juggling and making sure that everything is done as efficiently as possible, as accurately as possible, and that's the most important thing. We want to get it over to the treasurer so we can get the bills out, but we want to make sure that it's right. So Linda does a great job with that. We do have the property tax report for Kankakee County. I think you were going to hand those out. We can answer any questions that you've got right now, but I believe that we're going to be going over that in greater depth at the Finance Committee meeting. But if there's any questions you've got right now, we'll answer them to the best of our ability.
That's what this is.
Correct.
The reason, while she's handing that out, the reason that I asked Mr. Hendrickson to talk about this is I think it was at the last finance meeting, I think, Mr. Wheeler, you said, if you want to know more about this, it should come to community services. So anyhow, I was intrigued because finance, but what was mentioned there is that the assessor, the clerk, and the treasurer are all involved in this one little page. Is that correct too? So how does it start?
Well, you know, Linda, and I'll defer to Linda because she's certainly better versed in it than, and I don't want to misspeak. You know, the taxing bodies file their levies with us. We get the aggregate extensions from the assessor's office. Linda does her computations, and based on Patel, and Linda, I'm going to let you speak for.
I don't know how much you want to know. I mean, the DevNet program actually does most of the calculations, which is really nice. All I have to do is check them and make sure that, you know, things are calculating out correctly. The aggregate extension is usually the previous year's extension. The system takes the highest of the last 3 years, which normally is the year before. So that's what they use for the aggregate extension. And then it's just calculated out from there with the CPI and, excuse me, to get the you know, the numbers that are used to come up with the limiting factor.
Okay, so just looking at all those things that you just said were at the top of the page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much.
So in the case that's here, the aggregate extended base are those the three numbers are one under the other. The highest number, the 1925723,108, is the one that's taken because it's the highest of 3 years.
No, the aggregate extension is the 19,200,360.63.
Okay, and that was the highest.
That was the highest of the last 3 years. The rest of these figures have nothing to do with the aggregate extension
Okay.
of previous years. Or
Okay.
anything.
And then it's taken times
Yeah, that's multiplied out by the CPI,
which is
which is this last year was 1.2 2.21.
But it
No,
stands
was,
for-
was 2.1. I had to stop thinking, it was 2.1%.
But it stands for what? CPI.
Consumer Price Index.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't think of that one real quick. And then, that's calculated out or multiplied out to get the numerator. The current EAV, which is the equalized assessed value, is the current for the year. If there's any annexations or disconnections, those are calculated in there to get an adjusted EAV, which there weren't.
Mm-hmm.
So the current EAV and the adjusted EAV is the same.
Mm-hmm.
And then the calculations go across. You can see that, it takes out new property. The state multiplier is used, which is 1. So it just really is just using the number itself and calculates across to get us the denominator. So you take the numerator from the top, the denominator, and get the limiting factor. The numerator divided by the denominator to get the limiting factor. And that limiting rate is what tells us whether or not we get cut back by Patel. In this instance, the district was over the limit because our rate at the moment was 1.0592 and it could only be 1.0313. So we were cut back by 0.9737%. So if you look down at the bottom, the left side is there's a column that says actual rate. That's what it had calculated out. And then if you go clear over to the right, there's a certified rate. That's the rate that was actually used to calculate the extensions for this year. And you'll see we have the 1.0313. That's Patel brought us back to that point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's clear. That's clear. So the levy requests are from whom?
From the county in this instance.
In the county. These are county
Yeah, this
requests
is
for
the
levy
county's report.
by those various areas.
Yeah.
By those various areas, and the rates, maximum rates, come from
From the state.
the state, and then that's calculated, and the actual rate
Is the calculated rate rounded?
rounded. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then tell me again at least what PTELL means again.
Patel is property tax extension limitation. law.
Okay, and that's what that column is. That's the limitation, and then the rates and the certified rates and the extension. So once we get to the extension, then there's the after TIF and EZ, and the overlap. So those last 3 columns, what?
Well, the after TIF and EZ, because the county has, and I don't have that page that shows that, but obviously the county has enterprise zones and TIF districts, which is tax increment finance districts.
Mhm.
And so those are not, the TIF districts, the money is taxed, but the county doesn't get it, the TIF district gets it. The enterprise zone, they aren't taxed on that amount. So that amount is all deducted off of what the extension is. So if you look, it's, the total extension after TIF and EZ is less than what the total extension is because that amount is taken out. It doesn't, the county's not going to get it, or the district, whoever it may be.
And
that is applied.
in this case, the last 2 columns are the same because of that.
Right, because we don't have any overlap. There's no county that overlaps with the county.
Okay, then
But perhaps like KCC overlaps with Iroquois, a half a dozen other counties.
Right.
Village of Shabans overlaps with Iroquois County. So that would be where you would see that column come into play.
thank you. So then who uses the extension? Let's go just one. Who uses the extension?
Who uses the
Does
extension?
the Tresh? Mr. Whalen.
I do. This is how we basically set how much goes into each fund. We're tax capped, so that amount of money at the bottom there is how much you have, and so you have to shift things around to make it balance on those percentages. Does that make sense?
It does.
So when we decided to give the VAC more money and up their percentage, that has to come away from somewhere else.
So
With
that-
consumer price index in new construction was standing. Those sit outside of that. You're allowed to capture that when somebody builds a new house. You're allowed to capture that, or a new factory or whatever else, if it's not an enterprise zone. So this gets moved around on a yearly basis. This is why when you start to talk about like the pension problem that we saw with IMRF, we may have to shift it back towards that, but we have to take it from somewhere else. That it's really a puzzle that you have to put together each year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense because as I drove in today, that was the question. If looking at this, the lowering of rates of the circuit clerks area and the raising the IMRF should affect the distribution of this.
Well,
Or the
and they compete at this point with us not being able to collect the fees and the circuit clerk. That means the general fund, which is corporate, has to pick up anywhere from $300,000 to $600,000 more. But if at the same time the pension fund is competing for that same allocation, see the problem.
right.
Where does that come from? Do we short highways? Mark Rogers just fell off of his chair somewhere. You know, the health. You see where I'm going with this? I mean, those are where the really tough financial decisions come in when these curveballs are thrown at you by, frankly, people who don't even live here.
So the first and the third are what you're speaking of. The first line, the 5 million, and the third line, 4,000,005. Those are the ones that might be affected. They would have to be increased.
Well, they could be affected, but then if you look at liability insurance, that's tort fund.
Oh.
So do you have to pull back on tort fund to fund those other things?
The only thing that you couldn't adjust would be the non-cap, the bonds.
Right, exactly.
So you could
Yeah.
wiggle around pretty much any of those other funds
Right.
except for the bonds.
Correct.
So as you're working in your budgeting committee, this is the number. This is the number.
Yeah, that's what you'll have for the most part. I mean, you also have other revenues that come in through other
The
sources.
grants and things.
Grants and obviously revenue from the jail and things like that. That's not in here. This is just the taxation side of it.
Are you 16? 16? Ms. Peters?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. How many of these worksheets do you put out? Is it every unit of government, like the villages each have one?
Yeah.
How low does it go? Like a library district? Or are they part of?
Well, library districts do it, the multi-township assessors, park districts.
Okay. This is a lot of work. You're showing us one.
That's why
The biggest one, probably.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why I'm glad that it's done by a system and not by hand.
It used to be done by hand
Yeah, I know.
when I first started here. Of course, we didn't have Patel back then. But all of these reports for all the units of government are available on our website, KankakeeCountyClerk.com, under tax information. So they are public records. So, you know, in interest of full disclosure, we want to make those available to the public.
Just for
Yeah.
my information, question. If there is no PTEL for that unit of government, will it have that column in
Yeah.
this report? It'll still have it?
It'll still have it, but it'll be the exact same number as the total extension.
Okay.
The number is a levy. It is not actual money. Is that right?
Yeah, because you realize that the following year when it actually, you see what came in.
Hopefully.
Usually it's pretty close.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So just my last question until someone has another is, then you said the assessor is involved because that's where the numbers,
That's where the equalized assessed valuation comes.
your office is the extender,
Mm-hmm.
the treasurer is the,
Collector.
they all work together.
Yes.
And
We're the
even to,
spender.
excuse me?
And we're the spender.
Oh, yes, that's right. Even today, people were paying taxes. That's good.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. You did a great
Yeah.
job. Yes, Ms. Peterskin.
Thank you again, Madam Chairman. How does the TIF and or the enterprise zone affect this? So if the higher TIF we have, the more money we collect, or the more money, or the less money is available in these funds? How does that work?
The TIF money, the taxes that are collected through the TIF go to the TIF district. They do not go to the taxing body.
So it's less
And-
money for us to spend.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, technically that's it until the TIF expires.
Does it raise taxes to have a TIF because you need?
No, the tax rate is still the same. It's just the difference between what the tax rate was when the TIF was set up to what it would be the next year, or on and on and on, goes into the TIF fund instead of to the collection.
I understand about the
Yeah.
percent, but dollar-wise, would it go up? your taxes go up, dollar wise.
Well, your taxes are based on the rate, so it's however whatever the rate is, so. I mean, you're still gonna go up even because your rate's going up, even though it's only gonna be going up based on your old value rather than your new value, because, I mean, you're still it'll go up based on the new value, but the difference between the old value and the new value goes into the TIF instead of into, like, the county and the whatever taxing bodies you happen to have in your tax.
Complicated.
It is.
Yeah, but thank you for trying, for helping us out. There's another, Mr. Legess.
I was just wondering, how does a project like CSL, how is that, once it's completed, that $1 billion, how is that treated in the, they're not asking for anything, so are they treated like new property or that extra whatever, or does it just go on the rolls normally?
Well, it would probably depend on how it's assessed. I would assume that some of that would go under new construction, Linda? Yeah. That's probably a better Eric question.
Yeah, I would say that's a better Eric question.
Oh, there he is now.
And he happens to be here today.
You want me to step over and?
Well,
What?
can she-
When I come up?
Yeah.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought.
I don't wanna interrupt the middle of what they're doing.
Sure.
You want me to comment now about that? The problem is I won't remember.
Oh, that's true.
Well, you're next anyway, so why not? Yeah.
I'm wondering, should I?
Sure,
You
yeah,
can wait.
yeah.
You can wait.
While you're going, I just mentioned it is in the enterprise zone. So they don't pay, if they buy the materials for the building in Illinois, that there is no sales tax. And they are on a sliding property tax abatement scale of over 5 years, 80, 60, 40.
Oh, okay, that's
percent.
what I wanted to know.
That's what you get in an enterprise zone. And then after that, you pay full boat on property taxes.
Okay,
So, but then they every time they go to build a new building, that's a really nice permit fee for the county. And they pulled 2 of them lately, so.
okay. That's what I wanna know, Andy, about the sliding.
Anything
Yeah,
to add?
apart from the enterprise zone part of that you just discussed, as the project gets completed, and remember it's a 10-year at least project if I understood it correctly, and my feeling is that if the target is 10 years, it may take a little longer than that still. As buildings are completed, they will be assessed, and that should be put on as new property. That would show up as new property in the reports. That's how that would work.
Okay, Mr. Snipes.
One question I do hear that they said it's going to be assessed as new property. However, when they bought up CSL Bearing and used their existing structures or whatever, would that be considered new property, or would we just be dealing with the permit to renovate everything that they're doing?
If it's not a new structure, then that would be revalue. If it's a new structure, then it would be called new property.
New property.
Does that help answer that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Good discussion, everyone. Do you have another question? On to the next.
Okay. Kelly, can you flip me onto the... Okay. Last month, we talked about, Linda, if you want to leave, you can, or you can stay. I don't... Okay. We had talked about the need to do some polling place consolidation with the concerns over election judges and our equipment. I've reviewed some of those, and I do have 4 for your consideration today. The first one would be to consolidate the 2 polling places in St. Anne Township. We've looked at a new polling place for them that would be at First Presbyterian Church. The total number of registered voters at that polling place would be 1,346. If you look at the numbers below, you'll see that the largest number that they had cast was in 2016 at 822 ballots, which I believe is manageable by a full set of judges. The next one we're looking at is combining auto polling places 1 and 3. We would be moving them to the Joint Armed Forces Center. We don't currently pay any polling place rent on that facility. The total number of registered voters would be 763, and the largest number of the 2016, they had 459 ballots cast at the polling place. Next one would be Kankakee precincts 4 and 5. Be moving those voters that are currently at the Bird Park Fieldhouse to the county health department. That would give you a total in that polling place of 1,655 registered voters, and the largest number that we had cast at the polling place was 806. And the last one would be at the First Church of the Nazarene. Total number of registered voters 1,849, which is a large number, but the largest number of votes cast at the polling place in 2016 was 593. Spoken to all of the county board representatives in those districts, and none of them had any concerns with us consolidating those polling places. So I would need a motion to consolidate those 4 polling places.
Is there a motion to do that? We need a motion first.
Motion first. That's Robert's rules motion.
Wheeler will make the motion. Ms.
Yeah.
Parker will second the motion. Now your discussion, Mr. Snipes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dan, what would occur if, by chance,
what would occur if you saw like a massive influx in, say, that particular voting district? Like if it, if you came closer to like, say 90% of that 1,800, would that be enough for the judges to handle, or do you have a contingency plan on that?
A 90% turnout in that district?
I'm just saying.
Well,
worst case scenario.
Historically has never happened.
Worst case scenario.
Best case scenario.
Or best case scenario,
Right.
basically, yes.
If we saw that probably, and it happened on election day, it's 5 blocks away from this building, we'd run another ballot box out to them, and we would be able to, and if we needed to get some more judges, we'd probably find some more judges, but I wouldn't make that decision if I thought that there was any possibility of us having 1,000 ballots cast at that polling place.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lejes.
Does this affect Kankakee Commons and what Heritage Village? Are they in 8 and 11?
They're currently in 11,
Okay.
so they would still be at the same location.
Okay.
So Mr. Snipes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My concern, I know you'll check with the county board members, but were there any objections from those precinct committeemen out there, because they're the individuals who deal with the election judges?
There aren't a lot of precinct committeemen out there. I did not reach out to the precinct committeemen. Part of the problem that we've got is that we're having difficulty finding judges.
Mm.
So, if we had 5 solid judges at both of those polling places, we might not be making that consideration.
Okay. My thing is, because you hear the backlash after that. I mean, once you do something, because they were not included in the conversation. So I wanted to make sure that we know, or at least that it is, when we discuss it, that they have some type of input before you make the decisions, if there's no objection. Because if they ask me, a lot of times you'll call or try to call these precinct committeemen or either the respective central committees of the respective parties to make sure that there is no, feedback after the fact.
I have difficulty to be perfectly honest, I have difficulty getting feedback from the central committee chairman on both sides.
Oh, good. And
Okay.
I just want to make sure that's right, so when they see there was well discussed, it was a discussion regarding those efforts.
Mr. Wheeler.
Do you remember what turnout was percentage-wise in the 2016 election?
I don't have those figures in
Pretty
front
high,
of me.
but it was 50%?
Probably for Kankakee 8, it was, I believe that was the one polling place that we had that did not have a 50% turnout.
Okay.
Oh.
But even to the 90% comment, I mean, historic highs still didn't even cover
Right.
what we're talking about here, you know, as far as making it an untenable situation.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I just, for perspective, not to say
Sure.
your question wasn't valid, you know, but it was, you know.
Well, I'd really like to take a minute to do this, just for everyone who might get a question from your constituents, is to look at, we'll go backwards, 8 and 11, where is 8, where is 11, where is 6? Really, where are they located?
Well, I mean, you see where the river is, and Kankakee 8, its current polling place would be at St. Mary's, which would be just right about where that K is on the Kankakee 8. And Kankakee 11's polling place is on Entrance Avenue.
Okay.
Now, the buses do run, you know, for those people that might not be able to physically make it to the polling place at Kankakee 11 by walking, and I'm not sure how many people walk to the polling place, and I don't know that there's any studies that exist on that. The buses do run in Kankakee 8, and they do run right by the First Church of the Nazarene.
Which is 11, you saying?
Correct.
Okay, so you're putting 8 into 11. is that
Correct.
right? Okay. 8 into 11. Oh dear. Hold a second, I have to get my pen. Got it. Okay, so that's the consolidation there. 6 is not involved, it's just.
Not at all.
reference.
It's just
Okay.
part of it's on the map.
Okay, so you're just moving 8 up to 11.
Correct.
Okay, let's go back to 4 and 5 in Kankakee then.
Okay.
4 is,
4 is at the polling place is at the health department,
sure.
and 5 is you know where the Bird Park Field House, right by the quarry there.
Yes.
So
You're moving 5 into 4.
correct.
Okay, and again, 6 is not involved, just
Correct.
on both maps.
Sure.
Okay, so 5 into 4. Okay, and then Otto 1 and 3, where are they now?
Otto 3 currently votes at St. James Church in Irwin.
Erwin.
There are 320 registered voters in that polling place, and we would be moving them to the Joint Armed Forces Joint Armed Forces Center, which is just a little bit past the airport.
Sure.
In Otto 1.
1 and 3, so 3 into 1.
Right.
And that Chabans Otto 2 is not involved.
It's gonna be left alone.
Wow. Well, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so Irwin would go over to the reserve.
Correct.
Okay, okay, and then St. Anne is just within the village.
Consolidating the entire township to the First Presbyterian Church in the village of St. Anne.
And they meet now where?
St. Anne 2 is at Witchard First Reformed, which is a couple miles out of city limits.
Oh, sure.
And St. Anne 1 is currently at Village Hall.
Oh.
I don't believe that Village Hall would be large enough to sustain both polling places.
So you're literally moving 2 into a different one.
Correct.
Okay, okay, that's clear. Is it, anyone else have a question? Okay, Mr. Carrico.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dan, in my question, I have 3 components of it. What would be the current number of judges that we have right now with the polling places, and what you predict to have as the number of judges after consolidation? If you could refresh my mind here a little bit, how much do we pay per each judge?
If we are working 5 judges in a polling place, we pay $160 for each judge. For smaller elections, we may schedule down to go to 3 judges, in which case we pay them $200 apiece, but it would be $600 for the polling place for judges for that precinct for that election. If we worked 5, it would be $800.
So in terms of savings, in terms of number of judges and the dollar amount after consolidation, what do you?
Well, I would say that for the primary election, for most of those, we'll look to see how turnouts, you know, going in as far as some other locations go, other states. If there's a big turnout, we'll probably be looking at 5 for all of those for the primary election. Definitely for the November election, we'll do 5 at each of those polling places.
Okay.
For odd year elections, 3.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lejesk.
Just a question, what is the precinct west of it was St. James Church number 3?
Correct.
What's the precinct west of there?
That's into Pilot Township.
I just, seems to me like St. James to behind the sheriff's department is quite a ways for people to travel. Is there anything closer going west?
Unfortunately, with Otto Township, based on the 3 precincts, we really don't have a lot of choices. There's nothing
Yeah,
further.
I know you're
there's,
spread out.
there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing further west that would be big enough to accommodate, and certainly not to move the people that are in Otto 1 over.
Okay. Just a question.
We looked at combining all 3 of them at the fairgrounds, but the fairgrounds will not be tenable as a polling place. Just what we're willing to pay in polling place rent and what they were looking for a polling place rent, there's a little bit of a difference there. So,
Just a commentary that I was able to help out at observing. What was it called? I was a
you were a coordinator.
I was a coordinator for these where you're talking about St. James and Trevans and the Armory. And as I visited both times I visited during the day, they were hoping I was a voter because they hadn't had very many voters. So I think they would be pleased to be in a precinct where people would actually come and vote.
Yeah, if you look at the totals here for Otto 1 and 3 for this past April election, the 2 of them had 50 voters. So.
Doesn't mean that, that even those 50 would travel someplace else, but
right.
If they want to vote, they could come and vote with you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Snipes again.
I'm more concerned when at the timing. I kind of like the consolidation to be in kind of our off election years because this one's a presidential election.
2019.
Yeah, I mean we're coming up to that presidential election, and I know you're going to be swapped. That's when people, for some reason, come out in numbers. In
2016, we had 459 people vote in those 2 polling places.
Oh, from 119 in 2017. Yeah.
Good question. Yeah. So if everyone has voiced their concerns or questions, who are ready to vote, it will be a voice vote. Because we're spending money.
Not spending money.
Oh, it's a aye vote like that. Okay. All in favor of the motion to consolidate as Mr. Henriksen has described, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say aye. That motion carried. Next.
Okay. We also need to do some precinct relocations. In Moment's Precinct 2, formerly at the police station, they've asked us if we could find a different location, and we were able to, we went and visited City Hall in Moments last week, and that will serve adequately well for the voters in Moments 2. Actually, probably better than the police station. Pembroke 2, we, in speaking to Mr. Payton, we looked at the 2 polling places currently, Pembroke 1, Pembroke 2, are separated by about 3/4 of a mile. Talking to Mr. Payton, he didn't see any concerns with having both precincts, not combining the 2 precincts, but having them both vote at the Pembroke Library. For the presidential election, we would have 2 sets of judges. Probably for the other elections, we would stay with 1 set. Bourbonnais Precinct 2 was Arbor Grove Clubhouse. And they asked us after this election if we could find another location. And we were able to find American Lutheran Church, which is on Career Center Road. And their size is perfect for a polling place. And matter of fact, we'll probably have both Bourbonnais 2 and Bourbonnais 12 vote there for at least the primary election. If you recall, and I think we spoke about this at a previous meeting, the previous polling place for Bourbonnais 12 was at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. That building has been sold to hospice. Hospice is still looking to get permits to do construction, and they are not sure when that construction will be done. So until that time, when they've got the construction done and we can look at that building and see if that would be suitable for us as a polling place, we can have them both vote at American Lutheran Church. There's enough space that we can have 2 polling places at that church. So I would need a motion to accept those changes.
Would you make that motion, Mr. Featherman? Mr. Zenz will second it. The discussion on it. I'm just pleased that Mr. Payton was agreeable because that had been a concern at one time, so I'm glad it's agreeable. It's a parking lot with paved ways.
Right.
Anything else about that? Good. Okay, all in favor of that relocation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say aye. The motion carried there. Thank you. Anything else?
Mr. Weber.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Legess.
I haven't been in a meeting for a while, so I'm pretty mouthy. Do you have to be a resident of Kankakee County to be a judge?
If you are, I mean, my answer, I'll couch that is yes. If you are a college student, you know, we do have a program where we have Olivet students. Who
Yeah,
are
that was my next question. Boy, you'd think,
who are working as election judges.
yeah, you'd think that you could get judges, you know, lots of them out at Olivet. You know, college kids needing a few extra bucks, you know?
You know, we've had a pretty robust program, and we do offer, you know, they do get, you know, a day out of school for free. But, you know, and we probably get a dozen, Lori?
Yeah.
A dozen students from Olivet.
12 to 15,
Yeah, and we probably get about the same number of high school students. High school students who are in good standing. We reach out to all the schools prior to every election to see if any of those students are interested in serving. So
I went to Eastern, and if you offered a case of Coors Light, you probably get more than you need. But Olivet, you probably won't do too good.
Yike. It's just nice.
But for the record, kind of elucidate good standing, and then also have we considered KCC?
we've reached out to KCC. KCC is a little bit of a different animal. Because, you know, a good chunk of their students are a little bit older, and because their schedules, you know, their classes are a little bit more non-traditional. We'll continue to reach out to KCC, but, you know, in our efforts that we've done so far, not as successful as we are with Olivet.
Okay, and then the qualifications as to good standing is concerned, just for clarification.
Clarification, well, I mean, that's state legislation that says good standing. I believe that they have to be an A or B student, and they have to get permission from the principal for the high school students. So
They have to be a registered voter.
if you're a junior or senior. So yeah, that would be the only exception why we couldn't have a registered voter as a judge.
Okay. Good questions again.
Okay. Pardon? Next month.
All right.
Okay. If nobody has anything else, I'm running.
He's running. Anything before he runs? Okay. Great presentation of a lot of things.
Thank you all so much for your time and attention.
Okay, Mr. Assessor. Eric, please come forward. Thank you. While he's coming forward, in your packet is his report. Would someone move that we accept that report? Ms. Peters, Mr. Zen, second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, say aye. Motion is carried. Thank you.
I have a few things to go over with you this morning. I was not here at the April meeting. I was away at a continuing education course, but I'd like to just start by mentioning that our department did maintain the ownership of record for the tax bill mailing address database for the treasurer to mail the tax bills. That's really important when he goes to create that file, to make sure that as many of the bills as possible are going to the right name and address that they are intended to. We completed that project to the extent that I believe we had all of the names and addresses in the system through May 1st, and he created that file later that day, so it was almost right up to the minute. Along with that, I would just mention that this is the time of year, or one of the times of year, where we have increased traffic through both phone calls and counter traffic, because with the tax bills going out, obviously there are a lot of questions and concerns about what's on the bill. So we're working through that now, but I would expect in the next week or two we will have it's all hands on deck, just trying to handle the phones and the counters for that purpose. I did want to let everybody know that I received the certified 2020 farmland PI values from the Department of Revenue. In accordance with that, I will be scheduling the Farmland Assessment Review Committee meeting. I've already basically done that. I just haven't put it in the newspaper yet. That needs to be done a couple of weeks before the meeting. I'm scheduling that for for June 20th at 10 a.m. on the second floor in this building, the conference room next to the recorder's office. Also then, I'd like to mention that the Department of Revenue did give me the certified median levels for our county, and I believe I provided in your packet some information about the percentage change for the county. You'll note at the bottom the county percentage change for the non-farm value this year is 3.35%. Does anyone have any questions about that report? Okay. So that takes care of some of the things that we've completed, going through the things that we've gotten done in the last couple of months. Pending, again, holding that Farmland Assessment Review Committee meeting in June. I think we've got a good agenda, and if anybody here would like to attend that meeting, don't forget. And I'll remind you next month, because our meeting will be just before that, June 20th. At 10 o'clock on the second floor. The other thing that I'm waiting on is the return of assessment books, which happens annually. We don't have any books yet, but that's not atypical. Books usually come in June and through the middle and third week of July, and we would still be in good shape if we got those numbers at that point. Does anybody have any questions over the things that I've gone over so far?
My question would be, does farmland assessed value change? Is that why you're needing to have this assessment review committee?
It does. Every year, it used to be that all farmland changed basically 10% every year. But when you change the numbers at a flat percentage, the ratio from the highest the PI, when I say PI, the PI stands for Productivity Index. So the higher the PI, the more productive the soil, carrying then a higher value for taxation per acre. If you just add 10% to something that's got, say, $200 worth of value, that's $20. But on the low end of the scale, at one point it might have been, $4. Mm-hmm. So 10% of $4 is only 40 cents. The ratio had stretched out to 42 to 1. Oh. And that really wasn't the intention when they did that back in the 80s. This was done in the 80s. So 5 years ago or so, the state came up with a new way of calculating the PI values. And what they do is they take the median PI for the state, which is PI 111. You take 10% of its value, and you add that dollar amount to every PI on the chart, from PI 82 to PI 130. So it's what it does is it shrinks that ratio back down, and it's going to do it over time. I don't have the number right in front of me, but I think we're about 8 to 1 right now. So over the last 5 years, it's gone from 42.33 to 1 to about 8 or 9 to 1. I think the correct range that they're looking for is somewhere between 2 to 3 to 1 on that chart. And I think that happens. I've got it trended out, and again, I don't have it right in front of me. I've got it trended out into the future, and I believe it doesn't actually hit 2 to 1 until something like 2027 or 2029. So it takes a while, but remember that as we get those numbers kind of pinched together, it's not making giant moves anymore. We've made the big moves from 42 to 1 down to 9 to 1 already. So the state certifies those values to us in the spring of, say, 19 for the 20 assessment year. In the event, because state law allows each county to decide whether or not they want to use the state values or come up with our own study. Unfortunately, doing our own study, I'm told, costs potentially $1 million or so. And if you did the study and the state didn't recognize it and didn't want to go with it, you still have to use their numbers. So they do give us an opportunity. We need to approve those numbers in the spring in the event that our committee would want to go in a different direction. Although I don't anticipate that. That's never happened here.
So is that, do the assessors, a township assessor, assess farm value also?
They don't assess the farm. They do determine the use of the property, which would qualify it for farm assessment.
And then it's assessed on your
right. So then we would assign the PI value based on its soil type and productivity index, and whether or not it's permanent pasture, which is a fraction of that PI value, or cropland, or other farm use.
So if this year nobody plants anything, will that affect it?
No, if you choose not to plant the ground, it's still farmland.
I see.
And honestly, I don't think you would. The farmers wouldn't want to go back to a 33 1/3% of fair cash value for the land, and really I don't think state law would permit me to do that unless I think it was probably maybe a couple of years in a row where it wasn't used for farm purpose.
It's just a sad state of a rainy affair, is what I'm saying.
Sure.
You feel so sad to not get a crop in, I think. Anything else? The other question I had was, all assessors in place, you know?
I'm glad you brought that up. That was one of my last things that I wanted to address. The idea of, we have 13 township assessment jurisdictions. All of them have township assessors in place. I know there was some consternation about the Pembroke Township assessing situation. I've received advice from the state's attorney's office, which told me that based on their understanding of everything that's going on, Pamela Basu is still the township assessor, and she has the legal right to turn a book into me when the time is right. So even that situation, which was the most questionable going into the spring, has essentially resolved itself, pending any other action from the township, but it would come from the township itself if there are any other issues.
Any other questions on that? And as far as you know, that she's acting in that capacity.
She is. She's come in. We've talked several times, as I do with all the other assessors as well. So she's acting just as she would have last year, as she took the position also.
Thank you for that. Any other question for Mr. Snipes? A question.
Just a sad but yet parallel question. As you know, there's a bill in the House that's trying to do away with townships, and that will do away with township assessors. How would your office be affected, and how would they accommodate, since the assessors are the ones that do the assessments in their respective jurisdictions?
Sure. I think each year there's typically several pieces of legislation that suggest the idea of either the consolidation or the elimination of township government. It's my understanding that none of those that are currently in the legislature are likely to pass, but I could be wrong about that. There might be something that is more likely to happen. If there was, you're talking about the complete elimination of township government?
That's what they're looking at. It's passed the Senate. That's why
Okay.
I got the concern, and I guess the governor is about to be involved with his decision. So I'm thinking at that point in time they might have maybe passed the House. So I don't know. I just saw it in the paper, in an article in the paper.
If township government were to cease to exist, then I would assume there would be some new state laws to come down to govern it even further. But based on what's currently on the books, it would fall to the county to become the assessing authority for, all jurisdictions. At that point, then it would become difficult with the staff that I currently have to try to actually create values for upwards of 53,000 taxable parcels in the county, and continue with the assessment cycle the way that we do. So, hopefully there would be some provision for, some valuation staff that would help get that done under my leadership. But I would wait and see what actually comes through and become state law before I really want to dive too deeply into that. But to answer your question, it would, without township government, in the absence of township government, it would have to come to us to value those properties.
Mr. Wheeler and then Mr. Legess.
The bill actually is only for McHenry County, and Eric is correct that the assessment would fall to the, in one form, would fall to the county, or if there is a township that is left, because it doesn't eliminate all townships, it eliminates the possibility for them to be eliminated. So the county government could leave one township. I don't know why they would, but I mean, they could leave one, but it would be up to the county to make sure the assessments are done and all the public aid responsibilities of the township are assumed by the county government. And the road districts would fall to the county as well, and all property that the townships hold as far as the maintenance shops and their facilities and all that kind of stuff. All that would go to the county. So from what I hear, it does have legs, the McHenry County one. It's not a foregone conclusion that's going to get turned down. So
I suppose when I commented, I was thinking more statewide. I did see the one for McHenry, and that could, in future years, kind of snowball into something else. But given that we aren't McHenry County, I wasn't concerned at the moment, given the question that you asked, Mr. Snipes.
Doesn't a township have to absolve itself?
right now they can.
They can.
Yeah, they can right now. It has to go to the vote. So we'll see how that flows. There's other things you can do if you're coterminous with it, like Kankakee Township is part of a city and outside of it. They could do things like Aroma could take the stuff that's outside of the city limits and Kankakee absorbs the township. That you currently can do. But again, Kankakee would have to assume the public aid liability and the assessment liability for those properties that are within the city limits. So it doesn't save money at that point. It may cost the city more. Does that make sense? But the road district would go to the county and to Public Works, if that makes sense between the two.
Your similar comment, Mr. Legester.
Yeah, I was going to make about McHenry County, yeah.
All right. Okay, anything else? Anything else for you?
That's all I had for this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. The recorder available today? She's not here today. So my question, and maybe Mr. Wheeler could answer that, then in our newspaper talking about opportunity zone, would that affect the recorder's office positively?
Opportunity zone is an investment opportunity for people to defer capital gains into a fund that can be used to invest in certain areas that are economically challenged. So not really, except for spur development in areas that might not see it. So it's not a enterprise zone where they're giving up any tax revenue. What they're doing is, let's just say I make, $1 million on the stock market. I can defer those capital gains and into an opportunity zone fund, and then after so many years, I can keep certain percentage of it, and then there are years down the road, a lot of it, the rest of it can be forgiven as well. So if somebody, you know, wants to build a marginal housing development, you know, that may, you know, not be completely financially viable, they can use opportunity zone funds to do so.
Mr. Leggett.
Things like that.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion, we accept the recorder's monthly report.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Is there a second? Mr. Snipes seconds it. All in favor of accepting the report, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say aye. Motion carried. Thank you for that. Animal Control. Julie, please come forward.
Good morning.
So now we need a motion. Mr. Snipes, you're gonna make this motion?
Oh, no, I was trying to get a comment in when you was looking the other
Oh,
way.
you probably wanna make a motion though, right?
Yeah, I can make that motion as well, but the comment was for previous, before she started.
Mr. Leggett will second the motion. Then all in favor of accepting the animal control report, please say aye. Opposed, say no. Say aye. Motion is carried. Okay. What would, now go ahead if you like.
Okay, along those same lines of those opportunity zones, it can be so simple as an individual that buys a house and can't, I mean, in that enterprise zone, and remodel it and then rent it out. They are eligible in that same capacity. So it opens it up for a wide variety. Sometimes just wonder about sometimes it can be good, other times it can be a headache for taxpayers.
Would the building permit charges come to the county then, or to the,
It
depending
would
where the
be probably
location?
respective, and the city, I think they said the city of Kankakee has
Would be the
50% of them are the,
In that location.
you know, for that opportunity zone.
Thank you.
So,
Alrighty, interrupting your report. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Hi.
Does anybody have any questions on my report this morning?
Okay, thank you.
So the IPTIP interest is back where I like to see it growing. It had certainly been down since 2008, and it is now starting to climb back up. So that's a really good thing. You'll see that the registration is a little bit low for this month. We've been working with a program to try to streamline this and make this easier with some of the animal hospitals. So while we've been working through that portal process, there's been a little lag in one hospital, but that'll get caught up here real soon. So you'll see a big bump in registration in the next couple months. Our bites, up a little bit for the month, up for the year. I wish I could say that I have some control over that, but certainly we don't. Trying to get that message out to make sure people's animals are, vaccinated and registered, at least when a mishap happens. Then they more likely than not can do that quarantine at home. It makes it difficult when that's not the case. Recently we had a dog that was raised and trained as a protection dog in the home for the individual, and they were not current, and family member had a friend over, and a mishap happened, and the dog bit a neighbor. So needless to say, they attempted to do a quarantine at an animal hospital that could not accommodate the aggression of this dog. The dog did come to our facility. We worked with the family to reassure them that we would do the very best we could with what we have in keeping the dog comfortable. And they appreciated our efforts. They brought additional bananas and apples, which we gladly provided the dog because that's what the dog was used to. And 7 to 10 days, 10 days if we impound the dog on the first day of the bite, it's a 10-day quarantine. Sometimes there's a couple day lag in there, but those are long weeks for the animals, the staff, and the impatient family that wants to get their pet back home. So just a little insight of some of the things that we have to deal with.
So were you able to rehabilitate the dog? Or did it go back home?
The dog went back home. I mean,
This was a long, didn't it?
yeah, it's just 7 to 10 days when your dog is somewhere else. That's stressful for the animal. It's just a long week for everybody, but we did okay. Izzy did okay.
So the monthly statistical data, is that your next report? So
Yes.
on the back side.
If there are any questions there, I'm happy to try to answer them. Intake was 59 animals, and you know, we always break that down into the what type: dog, cat, wildlife, hooved. Luckily, we haven't had any of those this month, and we were able to transfer the 2 we had. And disposition, then 70 animals left the facility in one manner or another. And we always provide the breakdown of the euthanasia, which you can see that, again, we are not, you know, certainly euthanizing for space or animals that have an opportunity to be rehomed or transferred.
Thank you for that detail. It's really
Sure.
good. Any questions on that details? So, and it continue to be able to place cats easier than dogs, it sounds.
We've been doing pretty good with that. We've even had quite a few ferals coming in lately. Neighborhoods that have, you know, exhausted all efforts to try to cohabitate with them. And they've asked us to, you know, come and help. Luckily, we had an individual that happened to walk in and stated that they had a really large bit of property with several barns, and they were looking for some barn cats. So we were able to help them. They helped us and provide these the cats that were feral but not so aggressive that you're going to get attacked when, you know, when you're out. Semi-feral maybe. Some, you know, cats that certainly would be happier living that life in a barn. But a barn setting that is responsible and puts them up at night, tries to help give them, you know, a better chance to live a good life.
So feral cats establish their own territory. Is that what happens to them then? In a barn area, they find their own loft and.
They can. Usually, I know Treehouse up in Chicago had a program within the city where they were actually adopting or selling cats, and they would put them in at homes, and you would have to keep them in a cage for 2 to 4 weeks at the house to try to get them acclimated with this is home. And, you know, they stated that they worked good for rodent control within the city of Chicago. Some people said, hey, it was great, but then the cats left. And they'd go get a couple more. Usually a cat, if it lives outside, has approximately a 2-block radius that they stay within.
Good. No, interesting today. Anything else on that? Okay, go to your next part then.
The next item on my agenda is back in August of 2014, the committee and the board passed a resolution declaring this 1996 Chevy surplus. I always seem to struggle to get rid of our vehicles. Nobody really lines up like they probably do for the highways and maybe the police squads or something. So this vehicle has essentially been sitting. We also acquired a boat with the new property. I really don't know anything about this boat. I do not have a title for it. In speaking with the sheriff's department on multiple occasions, they stated it was fine to go ahead and sell it as is, no title. So I am here today to ask that we put this back out on a bid. Somebody did come and inquire, but it still has to go through, as I understand, a official bid process. So I would like to ask the committee to approve to put this back out there, and hopefully it can go to the board the next full board meeting, and we can part ways with these vehicles.
Mr. Legess, will you move to for both vehicles or both items? Who will second that motion then? Mr. Featherling will second the motion. Is there any discussion? Who will you handle the bid letting?
I would only accept a sealed bid, but it'll be handed over to the board, to the chairman.
Right. The motion should be to declare surplus
Oh,
and
thank you.
then allow for this.
You agree with that, Mr. Lejes?
Yeah.
Declare these items surplus so that they could be allowed to be bid. Thank you for that. Mr. Featherling, second, and then again, okay?
Yeah.
Maybe have the bids be opened at this committee next month. How about that?
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
The good news is there'll be bids next month.
Yes, that's fine. The Chevy we do have a resolution of surplus on the Chevy. The boat, we don't, because it was, it was just left with the property. So
it seems that you can go ahead and get the Chevy out there, and go for bids on that, and put the deadline maybe a week before the committee meeting.
Okay.
2 days or 3 days, whatever you're comfortable with. But
Okay, before next month's committee.
Won't that be a new event on our agenda, opening bids?
Do you want to ask for a resolution to declare this boat surplus?
that's what the
motion is.
was. On the
Okay.
motion, yeah.
Okay.
So, all in favor of the motion to put the item as the vote as surplus, because the other
As
is
well.
already, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. The motion is carried then. Okay, there's something else? Are you in the middle of developing a budget for next year?
Not yet.
Not yet? What do you, my heart says, can you put some capital improvement, or can you put anything capital on that? Are you hoping to do something with the building, or?
I don't know that we're there yet. I just keep trying to save as much as I can, or if Bark's, able to raise anything and grow that savings, then I think at some point we'll come back with a discussion at the committee of where exactly we really want to go and what we want to do. And I think I'm probably looking at the board for a little guidance of, when those next discussions come, or something like that.
So of the numbers that, is the building fund the number that would be logically to look at? Is it?
That's our savings,
That's
the
your savings.
IPTIP, the 258, 267, 28. That's what our savings or our IPTIP fund is right now. And I was able to move $100,000 over into that fund this year.
Looking at that.
That would be nice if I could possibly do that again for next year. And we, as we try to certainly stay within our budget, I hold my breath every year on our old building that we don't need major repairs, and I just take it a day at a time.
Mr. Featherling.
Julie, do you have a spreadsheet or something set up where you can see what Bark supplies you with on a monthly basis, or is it just on a calendar year they give you an amount?
They're not really handing us over money on a monthly. They're raising money for, and their main goal is for the building, and that's what they've always stated.
Do they have a sheet that shows what they take in per month?
We do. We have, our Bark meetings, and the treasurer provides treasurer statements. If that's something that the committee would like to see,
How do you get a hold of that if a person wanted it? How do you get a hold of that if a person wanted it?
Well, I'm sure if the committee would like me to bring a report from the treasurer, from the Bark treasurer, I'd be happy to do that.
Would you like that?
Sure. I would like.
At the next committee.
Yes.
Okay. Good question.
Okay. Thank you.
You're just interested in the funding so that that progress can be made.
Like a monthly type thing, spreadsheet. Not per year. Obviously, per year would be good too, but we'll get that off the end of the sheet. So.
Mr. Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's important to remember this is a separate 501c3 or 6 organization that is not connected with the county whatsoever. So while it's good that you're sharing it, they're under no obligation to share that with us at all. So I just, and they don't do fundraisers monthly, so I'm not sure that would be, updates from time to time, that's fine, but we don't have oversight over those guys. I just want to make sure we're all clear on that,
On a past track record.
Sure.
You're
And
just
to
looking.
your point, Mr. Chairman, we did just at Building and Grounds put together a capital projects work group with Mr. Featherling is gonna participate, our architect, Wes Andrews. There'll be someone from courts. I talked to Julie a little bit about what we're talking about. We're not out of the hole yet, but we are able to see when the light at the end of that tunnel is, if you will. And we're gonna start to prioritize all these things that are lining up and when we have to tackle each one of them. Things like a building, things like we have 10 judges and 9 courtrooms and a jury assembly area that's not acceptable, and courthouse crowding and other things. We're not talking about building courthouses, my goodness, no. But we're talking about what can we do to address what and when, and then put dollar amounts to that so we can plan for the next 5, 10, 50 years for the county and not just have stuff roll over the top of us. We're gonna have to redo a ADA courtroom. We're gonna have to do the ramp. There's all these capital things that are coming, and by 2024, it looks like we should be kind of in the position to address some of these, which we would have never thought 3 years ago that we'd ever be having this conversation. So when we say about, you know, budgets and things like that, at this point that those can't be included in because we still have to borrow money from ourselves and banks, but we're trying to plan for when we can. Does that make sense? The way I
Well,
put it?
it's
Yeah.
2 documents. It wouldn't be able to be in the budget proposal, but it could be in a capital plan.
Exactly. And then that'll be prioritized. This committee will get involved once that's assembled, because obviously if there's a building, this committee would help determine what goes on in that building with Julie's help and work. You know, in other instances, it would be the judges determining what goes on in their buildings. So it's not just autonomous, this group, but they're the ones actually getting the list from everybody and then trying to figure out the priorities.
That's clear. And it's always good to have that star, a place to look.
Yeah.
You know, I always like that too. Something else? Okay, do something.
I do not.
Okay.
We have-
Let's stay there a minute. Okay, and let's go to the next monthly update from Tinka Parker, our Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. It's interesting the way this month worked is that there's a meeting this week on Wednesday for AWAC, but it's usually at the same day as Finance Committee, so it's just the way the Wednesdays work, yeah. Does the short report get approved? Just
Good
an
morning.
update.
Yes, as Carol said, we're meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock. We have some things on our agenda. We're still pursuing, working with different municipalities and townships with our contract for animal control. We had a little glitch this month with the city of Kankakee, but we're hoping that we can move forward with that in June. We are working also with the vets and to find out exactly what we can do, because there are a lot of dogs that are in the back part of trucks that are just loose, and there's a danger to the dogs, you know, especially if the owner stops suddenly, the dog can fly forward, or take off quickly, the dog can actually fly out into the road or possibly into another car behind them. So we're looking into that to see if there's anything that we can do to help prevent that from happening. So we have a lot of things going on right now, and we're just taking it a step at a time.
We had a number given to us. I think you gave us a number. How many dogs a year? One of you had a number. How many dogs are killed each year because of being in the back of a pickup truck? And
I don't have that
That
number
number-
right now.
That was Dr. Wegner had that too, and she was a lot.
maybe 10,000 dogs that
Yes.
either sometimes they're tethered and then they fly out and strangle themselves on their own.
And they drag behind the truck, or they tie them to the truck and they forget they're there and take off. So there's a lot of accidents that happen with dogs that are needless, and we really need to prevent that from happening. You know, I just wouldn't want a dog flying on the hood of my car. You know, especially if they took off, and I don't think any animal should, you know, die like that. As far as the swap meets, Julie, maybe you can update how's things going out there. There was another one a couple of weeks ago.
There was, it was relatively calm. Again, there was a good presence from the club, spoke with them. I think there was, somebody brought in a dog and they tried to say it was an emotional support dog. and about 4 steps away, they asked somebody if they wanted to buy it. So, and that is why they're not allowed, people aren't allowed to bring their own pets there, is because they'll simply say, it's my dog, and then they'll turn around and offer it for sale. And emotional support pets do not fall into the ADA guidelines like a service dog, a true service dog does. There were 2 people there with horses. Neither one had Coggins on their horses. It's a blood test that is required when you sell a horse or when you take a horse to a public event. And, you know, I think the one gentleman said, oh, I have him at home. And I said, I'm sorry, you need to travel with that. You need to go. Both of those folks did state that they lived in Illinois, that they didn't cross state lines, but we did have them load up and leave.
So the difference between last year and this year, I would say, is 180. I think we're doing a lot better than the complaints that we had with the animals being sold out there, and with the cat and dog ordinance. I think that working with the people of the organization has just made a big difference, and they've been very cooperative.
It's good of you to say, because we, at our last meeting where the gentleman spoke and said he was willing to take an active role in making it better for us, so that's good.
A lot of improvements since last year, and we hope that it continues.
And I think they're still willing to sit down and meet with us. They're, a lot of them are farmers. Maybe they're sitting more idle than they want to right now as they're waiting to get things done, but I think he stated, you know, a little further into the summer, we could sit down and maybe talk some more.
Anything else you'd like to add? Mr. Snipes?
A question was asked by one of my fellow board members, and I know in certain situations, county board members cannot bid on things like the auctions and all of that for property in our kind of property auctions that they basically have. But they was asking the question, do they have the opportunity to bid upon these items?
I don't have that answer.
You don't think so, Mr. Wright?
I don't believe so, no.
As the chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
I was always told no, and that came from the highway department when there was all the equipment, so I don't see any difference, but if anyone wants to email Graham before he leaves, you got about a week. So, I mean, that would be the way I would go, just shoot him an email and ask if you can bid on these items. Because it's sealed bid, maybe, but I was always told no. Those are from the old, remember the garage sales for highway department where they're selling saws and stuff that we may want? I always heard no.
I heard no. And I know at one time they sold all that furniture stuff, but then they told them yes, it wasn't. So I had not looked at the state statutes, so that's why I proposed the question. That's sometimes I know if it's our tax sales, absolutely no. But then in these other situations, I have no idea if there's a statute that actually prohibits you from that. So that's why.
It's good to know Mr. Graham is here, because we had a question about a letter to go to the municipalities.
Yes,
maybe.
I'm going to catch him today.
Good, thank you for sharing that. Anything else?
I have one more thing. Okay. Christy Slaby will be joining our committee starting tomorrow. And then, again, I want to thank Mr. Quinn for the past couple of years being with us in AWAC. I know I probably made him either turn gray or lose a few hairs, but he's done a wonderful job helping us out and making sure that everything is correct before we send it out there, especially with our ordinance.
Had an absolute opinion, which is always helpful then.
Oh, he's got an opinion.
Goodbye. Okay. Anything else then? You have nothing more, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there a new business or old business from anyone? Okay. Then Mr. Legess moves we adjourn. Are you going to second Mr. Snipes and say bye? Waving and seconding on the same motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carried. Thank you for coming.